I thought that maybe there's an opportunity to have kind of more civil conversations with people and kind of explore these issues and talk to people that I would never encounter otherwise. And my first guest was Terry Tornick, and I didn't know if I was going to do it or not. I asked Terry on a whim if he would come on the podcast, and he said yes. And I was like, oh, great. Now I actually have to do this. And I have to actually do it in a semi-professional manner because I'm going to have the then mayor of Pasadena on the podcast.
Welcome to the My SGV podcast. Our mission is to capture and share the stories of the people of the San Gabriel Valley. We believe our diversity is what makes the SGV great. And no matter where you're from in the San Gabriel Valley, you will feel welcome.
All right, SGVers, welcome back to another episode of the My SGV podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. And if you are new here, welcome. We hope you enjoy this episode with someone, again, from right here in the San Gabriel Valley. Well, we didn't even pregame discuss our pregame, Scott, but there are a lot of things that have happened organically from the start of the show that are pretty surprising. And I would say one of the more memorable and shocking things was to have another podcaster do a write-up on us that we had never even met or spoken to. That was quite memorable for me.
Yeah, it was such a sincere and genuine move. I mean, it was completely unexpected, but such a real kind act, you would say.
Right. I remember reading that and I was like, wow, this person has at the very least listened to our shows and maybe possibly even more. And like they took the time, they knew us and they took the time to write this thing about our show. And I was, of this journey of our podcast, it is definitely one of the more positive, memorable moments that I've had here.
Yeah, it was to me too, because it was a reach out by somebody who could be considered a competitor some way. And a person that would have no, just no sense of ill will or jealousy, reaching out like that.
Yeah. I was really, really taken back by that. And we'll get to that comment in our guest, but there's I was showing you that reel this morning from Albert. That was quite funny, right? That he had forgotten that we had gone to that restaurant. Do you remember that dinner that we went there?
I do remember. Yes, Bistro Na.
Yeah.
So our guest had hosted us at a dinner.
Yes.
And he forgot that he had taken us there.
That's right. Yeah. Well, if you're looking to check Bistro Now out or other places in the San Gabriel Valley, don't forget, check out San Gabriel Valley Now, your source for city news, announcements, events, special savings, and everything SGV. Check them out on Instagram, sgv.now, and read their new SGV Now magazine on their website, sgvnow.com. Actually, this most recent edition of their magazine has our old logo, but the next one will have our new logo. So anyway, so let's get to our guest. Our guest today, I'm very excited to have him in here today. He is the person that we were speaking of in our intro here. His name is James Pietro, and he is the host of the Crown City podcast. James, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you both for having me. It's wonderful to be a guest of a show that I've listened to for a number of years now.
Awesome. And you were that person who wrote that up. I'm curious, typically my question is, what's your connection to the San Gabriel Valley? But can we start with what drove you to make that post?
No, so thank you for bringing that up. And it's funny because we're recording this in early August, and actually your reference to that was actually last episode. So I was listening to last week's episode, and actually you mentioned me, which was kind of funny considering the schedule. But no, I've done the podcast for several years, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more. But something that I've done here and there has been a little bit of a kind of connections with different groups, and one of them has been podcasts that I enjoy listening to, and I've obviously enjoyed listening to yours for a number of years, and it was an opportunity to share a podcast with my audience. I have a Instagram account and social media presence is not very, very large, but I love to share what other people are doing, and since you've done so much work in bringing these stories to light and businesses to light and nonprofits to light, I wanted to share that with my audience, however small or large it is. So I thought it'd be just another way to make more introductions in the community and both introducing my audience to your podcast and hopefully vice versa.
Awesome.
I spent this morning trying to find the word to describe what I felt, and I haven't come up with it yet. But it was selfless. You know, it was a selfless act. It was a genuine act, a kind act, and one without any, like I said, fear of jealousy or ill will or anything like that. It's just, I come from a very competitive industry. I'm an attorney, right? And it was such a nice feeling that somebody would actually just share themselves so honestly.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I think that because this is not either of our full-time jobs, I think that provides us with a little bit of cover in terms of competition. So I think we're all about inflating and bringing to light these stories. And I think we're both kind of doing a little bit of the same thing. Mm-hmm. And the more we can share with each other, I think all the better. You know, we're both focused on the San Gabriel Valley and the people and the amazing businesses here.
And you're a little more focused on Pasadena specifically. I
am. So the podcast started because I am a resident of Pasadena. So I kind of focused on Pasadena, but I've kind of branched out. I've done episodes on Los Angeles, and I did my June episodes were I do 2 episodes a month, and my June episodes were both about Altadena. So I had 3 guests for Altadena. So it was a focus on Altadena. So I'm kind of branching out, not limiting myself to Pasadena specifically.
Well, James, I also want to get into your connection to the San Gabriel Valley. And I remember from our conversation, your family has been here for quite some time, but can you share with our audience what's your connection?
Absolutely. So I was thinking about this in advance of our conversation, and I have kind of 2 connections. One is a personal connection and one is a professional connection. So on the personal side, I started as a visitor of Pasadena in the San Gabriel Valley. I grew up in the Los Feliz area, and there wasn't a lot to do at the time there. So we would spend time in Burbank, Glendale, and Pasadena, what we consider as the Tri-Cities. In commercial real estate, we consider those the Tri-Cities. And so we'd spend a lot of time in the Pasadena area. My sister went to dance classes in South Pasadena, so I knew Mission Street really well. She went to high school in Pasadena, so we were always kind of in the area. And I was living in Houston with my wife in 2009, and it was obviously a really bad time economically for a lot of people, and the opportunity arose to return to Los Angeles. And so when we were looking at places to live, I didn't want to live in Los Angeles, and I didn't really know a lot about the West Side, but so I had more of a connection to Pasadena, San Gabriel, Arcadia, Altadena, and so we focused on that area, and we decided and found a house in Pasadena, and we've been here since 2009. My mother is actually from Montebello, which I know. I was looking at the list of the San Gabriel Valley. Technically, Montebello is not on the list, or there's like a sliver of it, but we were always kind of in the Montebello, Whittier area. And so we spent a lot of time in the Montebello area with my grandparents who were there for decades. And so I had a real affinity for San Gabriel, Rosemead, Montebello, all those kind of areas. And we were a big scouting family. So actually my Eagle Scout project was at Whittier Narrows. So I know the Whittier Narrows area pretty well. And then, so that's the kind of personal connection. And I've recruited my parents to move to Pasadena. They were in Los Feliz, and they moved to Pasadena. My sister's actually moving to Pasadena next week from Arizona. So I've kind of recruited some of my family to join us in Pasadena. And then professionally, I am a 3rd generation member of a family business. We do commercial real estate and investment, and it started in West Covina, actually. So my grandparents, my grandfather, my Italian grandfather, was a custom tailor from Italy, and in the 50s he kind of diversified and got into real estate, kind of put the tailoring business to the side. And so him and my grandmother bought a couple acres in West Covina, which was just vacant land at the time. There might have been orange groves there. And they built a couple of apartment buildings and a couple of commercial buildings there, and they're still there for the most part. And they got to name the streets that they developed, which so my dad and my uncle have names, street names named after them, which is kind of fun. And
do you want to name those streets?
So I think it's Dennis. It's been a while, so there's Roberto, and then Dennis Place, I think. So my father's Dennis and my uncle is Robert, so it's Roberto and Dennis. So it's right off the 10 freeway. And so we developed the business grew organically. We're have a kind of a very conservative approach to things. And so we've expanded. We no longer own the property in West Covina, but it started there. And the business has really kind of, you can pinpoint its growth and its potential and its starting point in West Covina. So there's a lot of different connections to the San Gabriel Valley.
Is that development you were involved in, or?
We did do development. So my grandfather and my dad and my uncle were involved in development, build to suit kind of situations. And they did some work with the county and other different companies. And then it's grown and changed over time. So right now we don't do really development anymore. We mostly do investments. So we will buy a property and do a value add. So we'll put new tenants in, we'll fix the building up. And we have a long-term hold approach. So most investment companies, they're looking at a 3 to 5 year time period. We're looking at 10 years plus. So we've held property for decades and decades, longer than I've been alive. We've held property. And so that's been a source of kind of stability for us. And
that sounds like a Pasadena thing.
It is a Pasadena thing. We own a couple buildings in Pasadena. So that's also the professional connection to the San Gabriel Valley.
Wow. So as you're sharing that story, what's going through my mind is, who else knows that story? Where does it exist? And how do you pass on that knowledge?
That's a very good question. So for years, we didn't have a website. We weren't really telling our story. And finally, I convinced them to build a website. So we actually have a company website where we tell a little bit of that story, not the whole thing, but a part of that, so people can kind of understand who we are. And I think it's really important to get that message out, because when you're a tenant or you're a buyer or seller, you kind of want to know who you're doing business with. I think that's really important. And we've expanded the business out of California. And so we own property in Colorado, Arizona, Utah, and potentially by the time this episode drops, might be Idaho as well. And so it's important that people understand who you're doing business with, and that our story is not really unique, but it's important for us because we are focused on long-term relationships with our tenants and making sure that they're satisfied and are successful in our spaces. And
it's a family operated?
It's family
owned?
Correct. Family owned and operated.
That's, I said earlier it sounds like a Pasadena thing, but, I associate Pasadena with stability, common sense, kind of, you might say Midwest values that have, carried on through the years from the founding of Pasadena back in the 19th century. Well, you probably know the story of Pasadena better than I do.
I don't know about that. I mean, both of you know quite a bit, so.
Yeah, but it just seems like Pasadena is a nice fit for you.
It is, and we actually moved our offices there in 2020. So we have a building that we renovated, and so we moved during COVID, and so our offices are in Pasadena as well. So there's more of a connection to.
We've just remarked so many times during our shows how Pasadena is just a grand city. It's a jewel.
It is. I think it operates above its capacity, I think, sometimes, because obviously it's only about 140,000 people, give or take, but it's well known obviously across the world because of the Rose Parade and the Rose Bowl game. So we're the the largest small city or something like that, but it's a really kind of a world-class city because of a lot of these different elements that make it really unique in Los Angeles.
Well, James, I want to give the listeners a chance to learn, a little bit more about you and your journey. What was early life like for you growing up, and what were some of the things that sort of, shaped who you are today?
So, as I mentioned, I grew up in the Los Feliz area, and 3 out of my 4 grandparents were immigrants from Europe before World War II broke out. And I think a lot of the values that were instilled in my parents from them was, obviously connections to their heritage. So we did a lot of connections with I'm half Italian, and my other side is Polish and German. And so we did a lot of kind of heritage-linked activities growing up. And obviously you want to keep those traditions alive. But also, I think there was a sense of gratitude to the United States, that it was a place of opportunity. It was a place opportunity that didn't exist in Europe at the time, or the Midwest, which is where my grandmother was from. And California presented this great opportunity for them to flourish, from a career standpoint, but also a place to raise a family. So I think those values really were instilled in my parents, and I think that's passed along to my generation as well. So I had a very good upbringing in the Los Feliz area, very supportive family, very hardworking family. We're because of the family business, dad and uncle and grandfather worked a tremendous amount, and I think those values were passed down. Sometimes I wish my dad was around a little bit more, but I think that it shows his commitment to both his career and also serving our tenants eventually, that I would end up continuing that tradition along. So I was very fortunate to have the upbringing I did. I mentioned that we're a very large scouting family, and again, it continues the sense of community service that was instilled in us from an early age. And by example, both my parents were very involved in the community, whether that be their church or civic groups. And I think that that example has been really important in my life. And as I think about my role in the community and my role in Pasadena. And so I think that those are that's the best kind of answer that I think I could come up with.
Did you know that you were going to, go into the family business? Did you resist at all, or did you look forward to it?
That is a very good question. It's a very loaded question. So my parents were very open about it. My grandmother was not. She wanted me to continue the business. And so I think there was some resistance to it as I was growing up. I thought I was going to move away. I went away to college, and I thought I would never come back to Los Angeles. I thought I kind of wiped that part of my life away because I wanted to get away from here. But the opportunity came back to work for the business, and I've really enjoyed the opportunity. And it's been a wonderful opportunity for me to spend time with my dad, who was, again, working a lot. And so working with him and seeing him as he's growing older has been just a wonderful experience for me. So we kind of divide our properties, and I work with my cousin as well. And so I work, with my dad most of the time. And it's wonderful to see your parents. We see them growing up as our parents, but then when you work for family business, you see them as a partner as well. And I think it's a kind of an interesting relationship, seeing that kind of develop over time. So I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to work with my dad and get to know him on a professional level as well as a personal level.
You said your family was involved in scouting, so was he a scoutmaster?
He was a scoutmaster, yes.
And you're an Eagle Scout?
I am an Eagle Scout, yes.
Awesome. And where was your troop?
In Los Feliz. So our troop was Troop 20, and it was at our Mother of Good Counsel Church in Los Feliz, so the Catholic church. And we were involved in that troop. And my sister was a Girl Scout, and she received her Silver and Gold awards, which is the kind of Eagle Scout equivalent. My oldest daughter's in Scouts. My son is in Scouts. And
Russell's an Eagle Scout. Was an Eagle Scout.
Yeah, we probably competed at some jamborees at like some sort of like lashing contest or something.
I forget, what was your project?
We helped an elderly woman with her home in Montebello. She was it was just taken over by the landscaping, and she couldn't maintain it. And one of our scouts' mothers worked for the city, and so she was aware of this. And so I think maybe her husband had passed away, and they were going to find her. It was like a jungle. Her house was a jungle. So we just came in there and took care of all that.
I love that as an Eagle Scout project. I mean, there are so many projects that don't do a lot of service, but I think that's a great example of a project that really had impact on someone's life.
And the neighbors too were really appreciative.
Yeah.
Right.
I had a friend that I was an Eagle Scout with, and his project was to repaint a homeless shelter. And I think all of us could agree that I don't know if it looked better after we were done. When you have teenage boys painting some walls, I think arguably it probably looked worse, which is unfortunate. But I love hearing that story about your Eagle Scout project.
What was your project?
So it was at Whittier Narrows. We planted some trees along one of the trails, and I haven't been there in so long. I haven't been back. But so we planted trees, we did some landscaping work, and then put some irrigation lines in to help the trees and plants grow. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So I think for the listener, maybe they hear Eagle Scout. Now, I don't know how popular scouting is still today. I'm not really sure. But the challenge is not so much in the work as it is like social life becomes much more important at that age, hanging with your friends, maybe girls, and it's tough to still pursue something, amongst all that. And there's maybe sports and school and all that. That I think is the real challenge.
Yeah, I think scouting is at a real kind of crosshairs right now, just because there's so many different demands on children.
Did you go to Philmont?
I did not. No, yeah, our troop never went to Philmont. Did you?
We did, yeah. We did
what was that like?
10-day trek. Backpacking, I think 8 to 12 miles a day, carrying all your gear, all the just bare essentials. So they weigh your pack, and I think our packs weighed like maybe 50 pounds or so. And we got caught in a few lightning storms. I mean, lightning that I'd never seen in my life, where it's yellow, and the instant you see it, it's the sound is there. It is terrifying. And we got lost on a mountain peak. We stayed on a mountain peak because the trail was no longer visible. So we were supposed to check into a camp every day, and we didn't check in. And so essentially we were lost. And so we went back up to the peak, took a compass bearing, and just trailblazed straight down the mountain. I mean, we were fine. It was exciting for us, but we essentially were lost. We made it in, and it was fine. Oh, are you isn't Johnny there right now? Johnny's there. Johnny's like in Philmont right now. Yeah. So
hopefully he's not lost. Hopefully he's okay.
Where is Philmont?
New Mexico.
Oh.
The Boy Scouts own a reserve there.
Oh.
Yeah. So
do you think that prepared you for your time in the Army?
Perhaps in some ways, maybe just the comfort of being in the outdoors, But I think my childhood probably, like, the Army was like very easy to me. There was nothing very intense about the Army. I just sort of like shrugged it all off, even the physical part of it. And as they try to break you down mentally, it's just, I just sort of smile. Yeah, because I could just see what they're trying to do, but they didn't really mess with me so much. So
I had a friend that joined the Marine Corps years after scouting, and he said that the Marine Corps wasn't as bad as Boy Scouts were on some of our hikes. So going on some of those hikes were preparation for his time in the Marine Corps.
Yeah. So you mentioned like you wanted to get away. You thought you were never going to come back. You had some pressure from grandma, but then eventually you made your way back into the San Gabriel Valley and into the family business. Have you been enjoying it this whole time? Has it been rather easy for you?
It was an easy transition. Obviously I moved back during the Great Recession, so it was a challenging time for a lot of people. It was 2008, 2009. My wife and I kind of jumped into kind of the Pasadena life. We try to do as many things around Pasadena as we could, and it's been an easy transition since I knew it growing up. I mean, it hasn't changed that much from when I was a kid and growing up and visiting Pasadena. So the transition hasn't been that bad.
And you mentioned you're married, and you also have a family as well, right?
I do. I have 4 young children.
Wow, how's that?
It's a challenge. I felt bad leaving my house this morning because it's summer vacation as we're recording this, and all the kids are home. It's a hard time, but we're looking forward to the kids. 3 of the kids go to school, so they'll be going to school in a couple of weeks.
I have sort of a personal question. You mentioned earlier, like you wish that your father had been around. Do you take that into your life now as a father, and are you intentional about being present there with him?
I am. There's a lot of work I need to do. I want to be very clear about that. But I think that I've had this conversation with my dad as well, and it seemed like over the course of the generations, the fathers in our lives have spent more time with their children. I think his generation, his father wasn't around very much. They didn't play a large role. I mean, this is the 40s, 50s, 60s. There was a different time. So he was more my dad was a lot more active in my life than his father was in his. And I've tried to be more active and with my children as well. And I think my father has kind of realized that. And because I work with him, there's a little bit more flexibility at work in order to take care of my family, which I think is a lot of places wouldn't be as understanding. And that's another reason why I'm appreciative of where I am right now.
Wow. Well, James, as you know, we ask each guest to bring an item of significance with them.
Yes.
What did you bring with you today?
So I actually brought, as I grab this, so this is one of my children's bracelets that they wore when they were born.
Wow.
And specifically, I have 4 children, as I mentioned. 2 have had medical issues. One of them is this daughter in particular that had life-threatening medical issues when she was born. and she's doing well now, and her prognosis is very good. But I think it cemented how I wanted to be as a father, and I wanted to be present in their lives and make a connection with them. And I had to ask my wife is the organizer in the family, and I'm the loose cannon, and so I had to ask her for this because she would save it, and I would have lost it 2 years ago. But I think it just represents a lot to me, and it's kind of having children has really changed my perspective on a lot of different things. Both my politics has changed a little bit, but also how I view services that are available to families. I think when your child's sick and you go to Children's Hospital and they tell you it's going to be 24 hours before they can see you, and you see all the families that are there that are just waiting, that's heartbreaking. Or when you take your child to urgent care because they're have a kind of the flu or whatever, and there's a family there that's arguing about if they can pay the copay because they don't have the resources. I think that the system has a lot of challenges, and I think that having a family has really kind of brought those issues to light, both the family services, health services, but also mental health services that I think are so lacking, that we need to be more supportive of families, and then also supportive of mental health for both children and then also for the parents as well.
Wow. Yeah, nothing changes you faster than, seeing your child suffering or in pain or like really needing you.
Right.
Yeah. I'm glad that your daughter's prognosis is better, it sounds. And you said you had other children with some issues, huh?
Right. And so because of that, we were, during COVID, because of my job, we were actually considered an essential service. So our offices stayed open. But because my children had kind of health issues, I was in lockdown for 2.5 years because I didn't want to expose myself to something that I would bring home. So I worked from home on Zoom and all that kind of stuff like a lot of other people did. But COVID was such a challenge for a lot of different reasons. But one thing, if there's a silver lining, I think the silver lining was that I've been around my youngest daughter a lot more because I was home for so long. And I wouldn't trade that for anything at this point because I didn't have that with my other children because I was at work. So working from home gave me that opportunity to.
What's the age range?
So my oldest is 9, and my youngest will be 2 next month. So it's kind of it's a challenge.
But it's great that you had that opportunity. That, as you say, it's a silver lining in a
really sad in a sad time.
Yeah,
exactly. So, but I wouldn't trade that time for anything.
I see your comment differently now about your working with your father and having that opportunity that you might not have. I thought it was mostly just to have extra time with your children, but it actually you need additional time, it seems, right, and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow, what a blessing there.
It is. And again, I've had mixed feelings about my business over the years, but I think it's afforded me a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
James, I don't know if you showed, but can you show the camera
Yes.
the bracelet?
The bracelet.
I see. Awesome. Thank you.
So it just says girl on it. Just do it because that's what they do when they're born. They just have their girl or boy before they put their
Huntington
name.
Hospital?
Huntington Hospital, yeah. So all 4 of my children were born there.
Yeah. My daughter was born there.
It's a wonderful place, and
Yeah.
it's recently merged with Cedars Sinai.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's an affiliate now of Cedars Sinai.
Really?
It is.
Wow.
So we'll see how kind of that transition goes.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. But I've always liked Huntington Hospital. A really good, classy place.
It is.
I had my surgery there on my neck.
He's got a bionic neck.
Bionic neck.
Well, James, I want to get into the genesis sort of your podcast. So where did that come from in your mind?
No, good question. So our podcast started around the same time. So it was like the fall of 2020. And I had served on the Transportation Advisory Commission for the city of Pasadena. And my term ended in the summer of 2020. And it was an opportunity where I didn't know what to do next, and we're obviously all in lockdown at the time. And I've always listened to podcasts. I've always enjoyed stories, getting to know people. And so it was the perfect time to just put it out there. And actually my first guest was then Mayor Terry Tornick, who you've had on the podcast. here, and it sat in probably this chair or one of the similar chairs. And I knew Terry from when he was on the city council, and he was generous and nominated me for this commission, and so I served on it until 2020. And I knew I kind of wanted to do something to kind of stay in touch with the community. And I'm a very shy person. I'm a very reserved person. So it was an opportunity to kind of push myself a little bit and see what conversations I could have. And when I think back on 2020, it seems like normal now, but it seemed like such a kind of dangerous time politically, where the discourse was so toxic. And I thought that maybe there's an opportunity to have kind of more civil conversations with people and kind of explore these issues and talk to people that I would never encounter otherwise. And my first guest was Terry Tornick, and I think it kind of steamrolled from there. I didn't know if I was going to do it or not. I asked Terry on a whim if he would come on the podcast, and he said yes. And I was like, oh, great. Now I actually have to do this. And I have to actually do it in a semi-professional manner because I'm going to have the then mayor of Pasadena on the podcast. And that worked out well enough where more people generously came on the podcast. But it was really trying to explore Pasadena's history and their area's history that I didn't know because I wasn't from Pasadena originally. And Pasadena has a very rich history, but a very complicated history as well. And a lot of those stories are just not well known. And so I've always enjoyed history. And so it was an opportunity to kind of explore some of these issues. I did a trailer of the podcast, and in the trailer, I think I said something to the fact of I was going to do this anyway, regardless of I recorded these conversations or not. I was going to go down these rabbit holes about history and different topics. And so might as well invite a guest on to talk about some of these things. And so that's kind of where the podcast kind of came from. And so we're going on however long, 2.5 years or so. Now we're going to be 3 years this fall. I've done 42 episodes. The last episode I did was actually a little bit different. So it was a recorded, narrated story about a building on East Colorado Boulevard, which is kind of a departure for me. And it took a couple months to research it, and I'm pretty happy with it.
I notice your shows are more issue-oriented. You do a deep dive into issues.
I do. I try to. I think that the best compliment that I receive is when, so I come up with questions and topics, and I provide them to the guests in advance. And I did that because one of my guests asked for that. And so now it's just become custom. And the best compliment is when they say, "Oh, you seem like you've done your research." And
I noticed that you would do research. You're very thorough.
I appreciate that.
As I noticed, you go, take a deep dive and discuss deeply the various issues.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of complicated issues and a lot of complicated topics out there, and it's important to kind of understand them. And it's an opportunity for me to learn more about winemaking or, gang violence in Altadena or anything like that. I mean, the topics are really varied.
I think our show is different. How would you describe the difference, Russell? Whenever I don't know anything, I ask Russell.
Well, one of the compliments that I love to receive is someone says that they really enjoy the authenticity of the show and the conversation. And that's a part of the show. And I would say the skill, if you can call it that, of Scott and myself, is to make the guests feel comfortable. And I think that plays out throughout a lot of our show. And because Scott and I know each other well and we have conversation very often, the direction of the show is constantly changing, right? And so I may have these questions that I want to ask, and Scott may take a turn here, and I'm like, okay, let me wipe all that and go here. But it's still focused on the guest, right? We're still trying to share the guest story. So I don't know how those type of things that are going on, which are really in our head, show up. But I know that they're going on because I'm doing them. We had some conversation. I know he's doing them. And it just seems very seamless. But I would say our show is a genuine interest in learning about the guest and getting their story out. And so we've never preloaded any questions ever for any guest. And I think I shared with you that I came across an interview with Larry King. And he said that in all his time, he had never preloaded any questions. And he said he didn't want to detract from the magic of the learning, there on the spot. So,
and on that note, I want to know about your podcast. Some other questions I have, like how far in advance do you plan a podcast out? How easy is it to get guests? Where do you do your show? Where do you do your show?
So during COVID, it was done from my home office / bedroom.
And you would have a guest come, or do you do it by phone?
So we used Zoom, and then we used I use a platform called Zencaster, which is similar to Zoom, but it records on two different several channels. So it makes editing a little bit easier. Victoria might understand that. So but now I've had the opportunity to do guests interviews in person, and it's usually done. I've done several. I have remote equipment, so I can actually go to some place with the guest. Oh. So I've done several interviews in backyards, and you kind of pick up the sounds. There was a helicopter flying above one that we couldn't do anything about, but then you got the birds as well. So it's kind of a fun kind of having that audio in the background. And then for the Altadena episodes, I recorded both of those episodes at a park in Altadena. So just on a park bench. So it allows us to kind of go where the guest is or where they feel comfortable. I did an episode recently where we recorded in the entrance of the Huntington Library. There are chairs and tables when you walk in through the entrance. And so I had recorded an episode with two of my guests there. So it kind of allows me to go wherever they feel comfortable, I feel comfortable. In terms of booking the guests, and it really depends. Some guests, it's taken me 6-7 months to get them recorded. Others are a little bit more, the time period is a lot shorter. But it's usually some people I've known. I'm going to be recording an episode with the owner of Found Coffee in Eagle Rock, Annie, and I've been a patron of Found Coffee for years when I worked.
Yeah, I think I saw you had something maybe on Instagram.
Yeah, I posted something about that because I was getting coffee from her on Friday.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have Annie on the show. We're going to record an episode at the coffee shop, so it kind of lends itself really well to that.
Well, that's a nice touch.
Yeah, so
to go out into the community.
Yeah, and I love, because I'm a member of a small business. I mean, we're only 10 employees, so, and we work with a lot of small businesses as a landlord. I love small businesses, and so the more I can have small businesses on, the better.
Do you listen to your shows after you've dropped them?
That's a good question. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I think I get to a point, I don't know if Victoria would nod in agreement with this, but once you get done with an episode, you don't want anything more to do with it.
Because you have to do everything?
Yeah, I produce and I edit it.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I do all the audio levels and then all the corrections and then reduce.
See, Russell is so involved, and of course Victoria, and that's what you do too.
Right.
You have to be.
It's self-produced and hosted, so I do all of it. And so I get to a point where, right when I'm about to post it, I once it goes live, I don't want anything more to do with it. I'm done with that episode.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that. But I think you listen, don't you, Russell?
I do. And, we have to listen to find the shorts and the reels. So, we're scrubbing through the old content often. So sometimes if there's a direction I'm looking for a reel, I may go through 4 or 5, 6 shows looking for something.
Yeah. So you hear it all the time. And
I'm listening at 2 times speed though, because I'm just trying to get through it. But
yeah, when I first started doing it, I didn't have any audio training or technical training. It would take me like a full week to edit one episode, and that's a lot of time. I've gotten a lot better.
Really?
It's taken a lot less time, and I have a lot of tools down now that I kind of utilize.
How long does it take to edit one of our episodes?
It's tough to say because there's audio and there's video, and now she's adding additional elements to it where she adds in stuff. So a reel takes an hour to an hour and a half, and that's a 60 second thing. Yeah.
It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
I'm so removed from it. See, I feel so stupid, you know?
I mean, it's a whole new world.
Yeah.
I don't think you have video yet.
I don't. And I don't know because I do it remotely, like at a coffee shop or a park. I don't know if I can.
That's right.
I think it just might be beyond my capabilities at this point. So
I like the fact that you go out.
I've really enjoyed it. So I had to buy equipment. I did a one-off podcast for the Pasadena Museum of History. They were listening to the show and they wanted me to interview one of their curators. And so I actually did an interview with their curator in his exhibit at the museum. And so I bought equipment for that. And then from there, I realized that I can go anywhere with it. And it's just a portable digital recorder with handheld mics, and it's been really fun.
Is it a Zoom?
It is a Zoom. Yeah, it's a 4-channel recorder. I've had up to 3 guests, including 2 guests and myself. So I've used 3 of the 4 channels.
I'd love to have this is the Feñez Mansion, right?
Yes.
Yeah, someone from there. I really like that place. Yeah. Well, James, I want to go into more of your podcast and sort of, how you envision it in the future and what ideas and thoughts you have about that. But let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
At Wormuth Law, they believe that just because you speak a foreign language, come from a different culture, or simply don't know how to navigate the legal system, that should not prevent you from compensation from injury or receiving benefits. Their multicultural staff have been helping SGVers like you for over 38 years. Visit law888.com or call them at 626-784-7017 and tell them you heard about them on this podcast.
All right, we're back with James. James, before the break, we were talking about the origin of your podcast, and Scott was trying to steal some of your trade secrets.
And I'm still going to work on that.
There are not that many secrets.
So when we come back from the break, we try to remember to ask the question. Sometimes, actually, I forget. So these are from this card game. I think it's called Icebreakers, and you can choose to answer it if you wish. They're supposed to be lighthearted, so here we go. What are you most worried about with the next generation?
That is not lighthearted.
Yeah, so I was listening to one of your episodes, and the question was like, "What superpower would you have?"
Right, yeah.
And that was really fun. I was prepared for that kind of question. This is a little bit. This is a little bit deeper. It's a very good question. Having children, I just want them to, in the next generation, I'm just worried about them being present. And we talked about this a little bit. But there's so many distractions out there, and my kids don't have phones yet, thankfully, and they're not on social media, thankfully. And I don't know what impact that'll have, because we kind of grew up, we're kind of around the same age, and we didn't have social media, and I don't really know what impact it'll have on my children. So I think just wanting them to maybe get outdoors and just kind of live life and not be on screens as much. I think that'd be the biggest challenge and concern.
Yeah, I'm also worried that free play, unorganized play, outdoors with your hands, uninterrupted, unguided, is missing. And you learn so much from that. And not only is it missing, in some instances, I would say it's like almost frowned upon, that free unguided play is wasted time. But I don't think that it is. And I wish that there were more opportunities for the next generation to just have and experience free play. Yeah.
Yeah, I think growing up, I think my favorite time was alone in my backyard, right? Or going on a bike ride with my friends. I hope my children have those opportunities and that they're not glued to, that my parents, the only TV we had in the house was in my parents' bedroom. And so it's like we weren't going to go into my parents' bedroom to watch TV. So there was really kind of no, TV wasn't really an option growing up.
Really? That's unusual.
Unusual now because, it seems like there's a TV in every bedroom. And we only have one TV in our house. It's in our den. So it's kind of like a family room. And so but they have Kindles and stuff like that they use. But I think that's the biggest concern is that having them go outside and, like you said, free play, I think is a big thing.
Yeah, I can't expand, anything more than what you guys have both said. Yeah, it's the same feeling I have.
And this is a suggestion from Tori. I want to pose this question to our listening audience and specifically the YouTube audience. What do you feel that you're most worried about with the next generation? Drop us a comment and let us know, and we'll share those comments in future episodes. Well, James, back to you. So the podcast, it's still going. You still are releasing stuff. We see you all the time on Instagram. What do you have in store in the future, and what sort of secrets can you share with Scott?
Yeah, because we want to do it before you do.
Well, we were talking about before we started recording that you record and this episode is going to drop probably in a couple of months, and I'm just incredibly impressed by that and the kind of the the system that you have developed over time. It's really a model for someone like me, and I'm both impressed by the production value of your podcast and also your interactions with your guests. I think, like you said, authenticity is really big, and I think you both feel very genuine with your guests, and I appreciate that. For mine, I'm still trying to figure out what the next steps are. There was a kind of a lull in guests. I couldn't get anyone lined up correctly in the spring. It just happens that way sometimes, and so now I've kind of picked up again, and people are a lot more. Their schedules have opened up, so I want to continue doing the podcast and kind of exploring these issues. I think next year is an election year, so I'm hoping that to have maybe some elected officials or people that are running for office. I've had some on my podcast already over the years, and hopefully kind of flesh out some of these more important issues that are facing our area and get their thoughts and plans for the area. I tried to do a YouTube video of around an episode, and it didn't really work really well, and so that's something that I want to explore potentially, is doing a kind of YouTube, do something with YouTube, and then also do more with social media. I'm trying to determine whether, I focus on YouTube or I focus on like Reels, like that you guys really do really, really well. So I'm trying to determine how much time and effort I can put into it other than what I have already.
What did you want to accomplish when you started it? Was it just something for your own satisfaction, or did you want to influence the community?
I think I started it not knowing what impact it would have. And so I think I had really meager ambitions of just putting something out there and seeing if someone will listen. And it was to explore a topic or explore a place or explore a story, a person. And I think it's grown in that I kind of want to get into more topics but explore some of these stories. I think I had an opportunity to talk with a well-known podcaster a year ago, and they asked, why are you doing the podcast? And what's kind of the through line with your guests? And I think it's inspiration, really. Every guest I have and every story that they share is inspiring to me. And I'm someone that kind of feeds off that. I need to be inspired on a daily basis. We have so much going on. There's so much negativity. I just need to be inspired that there's people that are doing really good stuff in our area. And every story that I've encountered, there's been an inspiration in there. And I am truly grateful for people entrusting me with some of those stories. And I'm sure you are with your guests as well. Because, it gets personal really quickly. And, I had a guest kind of really get upset, because, the community supported her business during COVID. And she was overwhelmed by just the generosity of people. And you get to hear those stories. But I'm inspired by my guests. I've had guests that you talk to, and then during the conversation, you learn that they were on a 8-year yacht trip. And you're like, how did that happen? Or Trayvon Saylor, who's from Sailor's Brew Coffee in Pasadena, he was a veteran and served in Iraq and Afghanistan, served the community as a police officer, and then founded a coffee shop with a coffee store with his family. Those are inspiring stories. And I think that's what I really kind of want to continue. And that's when I think that's going to be the through line going forward, is trying to find the inspiration in every episode.
That's awesome, James. I know Scott sort of jokingly said, he's from a very competitive industry. I don't think podcasting is like that. I think podcasters are a little bit like, here, let me help promote yours and let me, guest on yours and you can guest on mine. I think that's sort of the general feel of the podcasting.
And if you ever want to use cameras, you can use our cameras.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Keep my SGV light on.
I'll take that with me.
Well, James, I know you're very familiar with Pasadena and probably even familiar with Los Feliz and I believe Burbank and Glendale, you said in there. But we're going to find out some of the things that you like in the San Gabriel Valley.
So, James, we'd like to know your SGV3.
So, first of all, I love this segment. I think it's so creative, and I get to learn more about people just from their 3. I was hoping to do like 3 places to eat, but I decided not to do that because I don't want to do a SGV 6.
Yeah.
But there were 3 spots that I thought were of note that I don't know if have been shared before. And so the first one is the Caltech turtle ponds. And I don't know if your guests have talked about that.
No.
So in the middle of Caltech is a series of ponds and small waterfalls that you can go to. It's open to the public, and there are frogs and turtles there. And it's a very odd thing if you've never even thought about it, but it's a place where students go to just reflect. It's a place that it's very calming in this incredibly technical school, that there's this series of turtles and ponds, and then they have rocks from the San Gabriel Mountains. So rocks that have been around for 1.7 million years or whatever, that they, because obviously it's Caltech, so they have to do something geology related. But it was based on the original building of Caltech was on that site, and they had to demolish it in the 70s because of the earthquake. And so they've created a memorial garden because of that. And it's just a wonderful place. They have the student coffee shop is close by. You can grab coffee and just sit there. And on the weekends, you can see people walking their dogs and families visiting the turtles, because kids, love seeing the turtles. So I think that's a really unique thing.
It really is.
And I would recommend anyone going to visit, and it's free. You can just park in the neighborhood and visit it. So that's my first one. The second and the third are a little bit more obscure. When I think about Pasadena, I think of Orange Grove, and how Orange Grove is so symbolic of the history of the area. We think of it as the place and home of the Rose Parade, which it is because of the Wrigley Mansion. But Orange Grove was known as Millionaire's Row. It was the place where a lot of really wealthy people built estates, and that's what Pasadena was known for in the early 20th century. I'm trying to get my years right, the 1900s, I'll put it that way. And they built these grand estates, and there's very few of them left. The Wrigley Mansion, the Fenius Estate, we mentioned that earlier, and then the Gamble House is kind of on the end. The Bissell House, which is a bed and breakfast, which is kind of in South Pass, is kind of on the south end of it. But those mansions kind of all went away because of economics. And I think of like how the city has changed, and how that area went from these grand estates to apartments and condos. And there's a lot of different pieces along Orange Grove that are really important that we kind of often overlook. And one of those is Defenders Parkway, which is a small sliver between basically the entrance to the 134 freeway and Orange Grove. And it's a place where there's a memorial there for service members that have died during the War on Terror. Across the street is the World War I Memorial Flagpole. And it's something that, when you see Orange Grove in Colorado on TV or YouTube or whatever for the Rose Parade, you don't really see those little spots. And I think Defenders Parkway is so important because I think it represents the sacrifice that people have given to Pasadena in service of the country. So I think that's another spot.
You have to walk it to know it, because you
do.
won't see it otherwise. I know it because I've walked that. I lived on Orange Grove, and I walked to South Pasadena, regularly. And yes, I know that place, right by the freeway.
Right by the freeway.
Overpass.
Right.
There.
You can park in the neighborhood and walk.
Yeah.
And walk it. But it's so important. And there's also a marker for Pioneer Bridge, which is the bridge that it's the 134 bridge, the 210 freeway bridge. And so there's a little marker there dedicated to the pioneers of Pasadena. So
that's a nice.
So I'd recommend.
Certainly a first on the SGV3.
Yeah, so the Defenders Parkway, Orange Grove in general, but the Defenders Parkway I think is really important for Pasadena. And then the third is really kind of obscure and but I think is really important is Pepper Street in Pasadena. I don't know if you know Pepper Street.
I do, but
describe it. The reason I think Pepper Street is so important is because it was the home to the Robinson family. So Jackie and Mac Robinson were raised on Pepper Street, and the house no longer exists. It was torn down. There's a marker, I think, where the house was. But I think that Pepper Street was a neighborhood that when the Robinsons moved in, it was a predominantly white neighborhood. There was threats against the family. There was a instance of a cross burning on their lawn when the Robinsons came in. But it was became a very multicultural neighborhood. Jackie Robinson he created this a gang. It wasn't really a gang. It was probably kids in their teens called the Pepper Street Gang, And it was made up of African Americans, Japanese Americans, Mexican Americans, and really kind of showed the diversity of the neighborhood. And a lot of those stories and a lot of those people would grow up and change the world. Jackie is just one example of that. His brother Mac is often overlooked, but at 21, he had the courage to travel to Berlin in 1936 and compete in the Olympics and earned the silver medal only to Jesse Owens in the 200, and really shocked the world and sent a message to Nazi Germany about African Americans. And I think Pepper Street is important because it shows the history of Pasadena, the values and the courage that Jackie and Mac and so many others had were started and founded and developed on that street. One other story about Pepper Street is that one of those people that Jackie Robinson would play sports with was a boy who's Japanese American, Shig Kawai, and he was a baseball player. And during his prime, his family was interned during World War II, and so he didn't have the opportunity to play baseball and develop his skill. Maybe he could have gone in the majors. We don't know. But it's such an emblematic story of Pasadena. The Kawai family, the father came from Japan. He was a carpenter, helped build the Japanese gardens at the Huntington Library. And his family was interned during World War II. So I think that neighborhood is so important to not only Pasadena and the San Gabriel Valley, but also the country. It's also a place where the Foothill Freeway kind of divided that street. And so it really broke up a lot of that neighborhood. And so it shows the importance of the freeway system, but also the negative impact that it's had on dividing people and certainly the minority community that especially impacted. So I think Pepper Street is my third kind of obscure, but I think a very important street for me.
Those are very thoughtful locations, memories, and thoughts.
I would have imagined that he was going to come with that.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was going to be like that, but those were wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for saying that you like this segment. It feels good to hear a fellow podcaster say that. So
yeah. Well, thank you very much. I like I said, I enjoy the podcast and I enjoy this segment especially because you get to hear where people are eating or drinking or visiting. And so most of the time it's different.
Sure.
For every guest.
Hey, Russell, by the time this episode airs, will our new website be up?
Yes.
And that will have special SGV3 references.
It will. It will also have I heard, I saw, I thought in the community. So you can go there to the website, mysgv.net, and on the homepage or the landing page, there's a section where you can submit just something that you've experienced in the community. It will be reviewed, and then you can possibly read it on the homepage, like your little quote or your little thought. And this is something from Scott's earlier days that he experienced with the newspaper. So maybe you submit something to the newspaper, and you're looking for it in a future edition.
I love that idea. That's great.
Yeah, but there's a lot of really neat things on the website. The idea is to celebrate people, organizations, events, and history of the San Gabriel Valley. So that's what you'll find there. Yeah. Well, James, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think I got to see more of who you are. I definitely did. And it's really like you're able to be very vulnerable, which a lot of people I feel aren't always able to do that. And that creates a space of comfort, I would imagine, with your guests and just people around you in general. So thank you for being vulnerable here and for our audience and for us. James, where can people find you in the Crown City podcast and maybe even your business if they're looking for that?
Sure. So for the podcast, you can find it on most platforms. It's the Crown City Podcast. The website's thecrowncitypodcast.com. I'm on social media, Instagram. I think it's either Crown City Podcast or the Crown City Podcast. I don't remember. And so that's kind of on the podcasting side. And then for the professional side, the website's DePietroHoldings.com, DEPIETRO Holdings.com. And there's a list of buildings and then also available space as well that we've kind of developed so people can see space if they need space in the San Gabriel Valley.
Oh, wonderful. Well, James, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank
really
you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the write-up too and for being a listener of the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there you go, SGVers. Another episode in the books. Thank you for spending this time with us. I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Oh, and also please, if you are a regular listener of the show, please consider writing a review for us on Apple or Spotify. That really helps. And I guess by the time this episode is out, you'll be able to check out the new website. The full back catalog of episodes are on our website, mysgv.net. And until next week, we'll see you then.
Thank you for joining us on the My SGV podcast. Check out more of our content on our website, mysgv.net. This show was produced by Russell Mono and edited by Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. If you'd like to join us next week as we capture and share more stories from our diverse community, feel welcome.
Nice matter. No, kind matter.